Today on Voice of the Valleys, an interesting observation where an Indian judge tries to hide the asylum seeker status of a Pakistani rapist who raped a teenage girl. Interesting, especially when you consider that India and Pakistan are frequently at war with each other, but when it comes to furthering the agendas and initiatives destroying Britain and the British people, there seems to be some interesting common ground there. Not only that, Plaid came up with some very, very weird and scary remarks involving the criminalisation of lying and puberty blockers for children, and a popular Muslim commentator reminds especially the people of Wales of something which they should be taking a lot more seriously. All that and more today on Voice of the Valleys. Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys yet again with your host, friendly neighbourhood far-right thug, always satirical unless he's not, Mr. George Cresswell. Hope you're having a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Thank you all for tuning in. Greatly appreciate it. Greatly appreciate you all bearing with me. Hope you're looking forward to the drop of my conversation with Catherine Watkins coming at the end of this week. Go and check out the trailer or whatever it is, link down below, or whatever it is on my YouTube, Rumble channels, etc. if you haven't already seen it. You'll probably be seeing this Wednesday morning. Most likely Wednesday morning, the 28th of the 1st. I know I've been a bit off with my uploads recently. As you tell, I've had to just move all my equipment around again. I'll probably have to do it for the time being. Don't particularly like doing it like this. As you can tell, the microphone is a lot more prominent in the shot than I'd want it to be. But anyway, just gotta make, needs must at the end of the day. I'll be running a promotion as well. So for 3 lucky people on Patreon and 3 lucky people on Locals, if you use the links down in the description when you're seeing this, or the code EXPOSINGTHELIE, you'll be able to get early access to my conversation with Catherine Watkins, and also all of the members' perks free for 1 full month. So you literally have nothing to lose. Locals and Patreon take no payment information for the redemption of codes or the redemption of trial links. So you can just go in completely free. You do not need to put any financial information in. I'm not trying to rip anybody's money away from them or surreptitiously doing it the way some companies do it, where they make you put your information in to redeem the free trial in the hope that you'll forget it, so then they could just bill you at the back end, right? It's nothing like that. It's just completely free if you guys want it. So use those links and use those codes down below to redeem those free gifts, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy the perks, the members section. There'll be a video going up in there very, very soon on Animal Farm. There's my video in there, which is fully exclusive to members, which is my breakdown of The Last Girl by Nadia Murad, who is a survivor of the Yazidi genocide. And yeah, a lot of exclusive content in there as well. And there's just a lot of, sometimes we do exclusive live streams and all of those things. So make sure you just go in there. And even if you go over to the Locals especially, and just follow me in the free area without the, the paid membership or anything like that, massively helps. Because as I've said before, Locals ties a lot of its creator tools. So upload capacity per month, resolutions, amount you can live stream, etc. by the amount of followers that you have. You need to hit certain milestones in order to be able to upload more, and literally in terms of gigabytes of content. So right now on Locals, I have to go through all of these different hoops to try and make the files as small as possible to upload to Locals, sorry, which can sometimes be a little bit difficult because my upload capacity is 5 gigabytes every month. So I have to go through all sorts of weird loopholes, all sorts of different hoops which I have to try and jump through to reduce the sizes of these recordings like this, right? So take, for example, my conversation with Catherine. Obviously, it was many gigabytes of footage, and then luckily by the time I reduced resolution size and put it through different tools that I have, I managed to get it to maybe a couple of 100 megabytes or a gig and a half for that conversation. But even then, that's like nearly 40% of my upload for Locals gone in one video for that entire month. So let alone any kind of clips which I want to upload and stuff like that then as well. So even if you're just a free follower, especially in the Locals community, it massively helps. So if you go and follow me over there, I would greatly appreciate it. One more thing which I've enabled on Rumble as well, and this is especially pertinent given what one particular, if you want to call him political activist, political commentator, whatever you want to call him, mostly political activist, I suppose, has many different names, but I just call him Tommy Robinson for now. Obviously, he got community noted on X the other day for trying to seemingly push some kind of trading, don't want to call it a scam necessarily. I know there's a lot of them out there, and I'm prefacing this at the way for what I'm going to say at the moment. Maybe this will turn me into a kind of con merchant in some people's eyes. I don't think it's in any way the same thing, but I'll get onto what I mean in a moment. On Rumble in particular, they have this thing called the tip jar, except it's not just a regular tip jar. You don't put money necessarily towards it, like pounds or dollars or whatever it is. They actually allow tipping in cryptocurrency. So I've just enabled that on there, and obviously I'm not trying to force anybody to go and donate to it or anything like that. This is just a thing where, for those of you out there who might have either because you've been forced to, for example, I know Mark Collette, for example, given that he's been debanked, and I was watching an interview on a podcast with him the other day, you know, he's banned from flying to like 20 odd countries. It's been debanked because they're basically declaring war on patriotic alternative, the British government now. I know Laura Towler got debanked. It can happen to anybody, right, with the tyranny that we live under. But then obviously if you can't have a bank account in the UK, there's no way that you can necessarily like get wages in if you're just a regular worker or whatever. That's why cash is especially important as well. But I think that's why a lot of decentralized currencies, which is how at least I understand crypto. My understanding of crypto is essentially what I've watched on CoffeeZilla, right? A lot of the scams that have been run, I'm very, very well acquainted with the kind of scams that have been run and how bad crypto has of a name in many ways, right? And that's why this is not here to promote any kind of coin or anything like that, which I'm not here to do. I haven't created a cryptocurrency called like Valley Coin or Valley's Coin or whatever to try and scam you out of your money. That's not the case. It's just another wallet that Rumble have set up. You don't even have to turn it on, but I decided to turn it on just in case if there is anybody out that is more acquainted with crypto and likes to tip that way, or would like to spare me maybe a little bit of Bitcoin to try and help just a poor boy out, then, you could do that if you so want to. But I understand that there is a very, very bad name about it. I was iffing and ahhing over whether I was going to do it. But at this point, I just need to open up really as many, streams as I can get, all of the membership perks, all of the, different membership areas that I can try and take advantage of, just to essentially try and keep the wolves away from the door. Essentially. But I know there might be some people out there due to interest and stuff like that who might, be already well acquainted with cryptocurrency and stuff like that. And if there's any whatever, like £2 to £3 or whatever it is, or dollars, whatever it is, of crypto that you can send my way, then I would just be also very, very greatly appreciative of that. So no scam, nothing which you're going to put money in and then I'm going to promise you ridiculous percentages in returns, because it's nothing like that. It's literally a tip jar for cryptocurrency. It's literally a tip jar for cryptocurrency. So if you'd like to throw a couple of bucks my way, then you'll also find that link down in the description as well. Obviously, no worries if not. And if that's turning me into some kind of weird crypto scammer in your eyes, I completely understand. It's not true, but I completely understand. No hard feelings whatsoever. Okay, that's a long intro. Too long of an intro. Getting into today. So I was going to put this up as a live premiere episode on YouTube, actually, but I probably won't, just for the sake of how long that bloody intro was. So first thing I wanted to talk about first, there's been a lot of things which I wanted to talk about in the last couple of, weeks that have happened. Davos happened. There were so many interesting things that come out of Davos. The president of the European Conference of Rabbis referring to the Europeans who were worried about a demographic replacement, and rightfully so, as old Europeans, echoing seemingly the thoughts of many Jewish people, given that he's a representant for pretty much every rabbi in Europe, right? Being the president of the European Conference of Rabbis. This is not just some random rabbi in the back corner of, I don't know, Belgium somewhere, or in the arse end of Italy, let's just say, saying that, Jews and Muslims need to unite against the native Europeans and their rising nationalist sentiment for your want to survive via fear of demographic replacement, right? In order to suppress those initiatives. This is coming straight from the mouth of the president of the European Conference of Rabbis. You can go find that clip. It's all over online. It's kind of old news now. I know a lot of people have talked about it. And he called them the old Europeans, right? As opposed to then feeling, insecure at the presence of these new Europeans, as he called them, from the Middle East and areas like that, the Indian subcontinent, many areas of Asia, whom we never asked for and have had forced on us by, without our consent, by traitorous leaders. And he's now saying that those groups, the Jews and the Muslims, need to unite in the interest of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia to suppress the nationalist initiatives of the natives in these areas. Not a very good luck indeed. And then they wonder why anti-Semitism is on the rise, not just quote-unquote Islamophobia. Then they wonder why anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish sentiment is on the rise. Especially pertinent for me saying this, given it's Holocaust Memorial Day today. There'll be many, many interesting takes to many of the posts that have been put on social media. A notable one was shared noting the difference in opinion versus the difference in opinion of a native Brit, should we say, and then a quote-unquote British Jew. One of them was more so concerned, obviously, with the demographic replacement and the, rape potentially of millions of white girls for racial and religious reasons. And the other one was more so bemoaning the state, the decline of Britain, because it is how it's mostly affected, the Jewish community, namely with the presence of Muslims who then want to go and fight the Jews and kill the Jews, right? The last day will not come unless the Muslim goes and fights the Jew and kills the Jew, so much so that the stones and the trees will call out saying, "Oh Muslim, oh slave of Allah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him," right? So again, exactly as Charlie Kirk said, the late great Charlie Kirk said, when the secular Jewish NGOs and all of these other places, I didn't want to get talking on this for this long, but oh well, it bears repeating, that they are some of the biggest, promoters of the radically open borders, quasi-Marxist globalist agenda, and then they only seem to care when it affects them. Right, which is quite interesting to say as well. But the interesting thing is you wonder why a lot of these different sentiments start to rise, right? It's because atrocities have been inflicted on these European populations that they never wanted and never asked for, and many of the groups from these areas of the world with certain religious ideologies also coming into play have cheered it on until the moment it affected them, right? It's not something that a friend would necessarily do, right? For example, a friend who sees somebody getting a drug addiction, let's just say that, and is seeing, the friend selling off their TV and selling off the lamp that's in the corner of the room, selling off their table, their sofa to try and feed their addiction. They don't cheer the addiction on, right? They don't cheer the addiction on and try and be empathetic and faux virtue and all of this kind of stuff, right? As their friend is suffering, until the moment that they say, "Oh no, you got a problem because they just stole their table or they just stole their TV," right? That was never your fucking friend. Right? Let's make no mistake about it. Let's make no mistake about it. If you notice a friend is going down a path in which you don't like, don't approve of, or you're worried about, right? You don't just say anything when it affects you, right? You say it because you see them going down a bad path and you actually have some care for them and want to understand why they're going down that path, how you can help them. Maybe you can't, right? Nobody's saying you have to give up everything to help this person, right? But maybe understanding why they're going down there, maybe showing that you care, right? Not turning your back on them, or certainly not saying, all the things that they want to hear to try and justify it, and saying that they're a good and virtuous person for whatever. If they continue going down that path, right? That's not a friend. That's not a friend, and if anything, that's worse than an enemy that has already made his worst intentions visible and has already made them clear on display, right? Not doing the stereotypes any good, if you get what I'm saying. That was never your friend. And it does bear thinking about how the relationship, certainly between, religious institutions and the adherents that, in theory, the president of the European Conference of Rabbis is saying this stuff, it's going to filter down into their religious institutions. That's going to filter down into their communities. Theoretically, then, they would at least have some kind of duty bound by that to follow that sort of ideology. That is massively to think about, because, again, it's not necessarily the person saying it that we need to massively worry about the most. It's the followers, the masses and masses and masses of followers, right, that will go and follow it, right? It's not necessarily Jolani or any of the ISIS commanders that are going to show up and blow up themselves in a school anywhere in Britain tomorrow, or in a concert anywhere in Britain tomorrow. It's going to be that nameless person who got duped in by that ideology that you will never. He's standing behind you on the train. He's standing behind you in the supermarket, right? Could be completely nice, easy enough to talk to, silent up until the point where, again, takes a backpack into a bloody train station, or takes a backpack on a train, or takes a backpack into a concert. And next thing you know, great atrocity is committed. Right? It's good that we have the person saying out loud, seemingly saying the quiet part out loud about the old Europeans, right, who seemingly need to, for the interests of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, need to make their way for these new Europeans that would love to subjugate and conquer them, Don't think so. But then again, you get the stereotype of the one group holding open the door for the other group of barbarians to come in and do the pillaging and the raping, right? But that the one who's holding open the door, it seems, or at least certain organizations that headed up by certain people who are holding open the door, you can't talk about. It's very, very interesting, isn't it? It's very, very interesting. It does bear thinking about, at the very least. Your immediate response may be to call me a friggin' Nazi and all manner of other things right now. Bears thinking about, at the very least. But yeah, that's a little tangent on that issue. When we're talking about, it is relevant to what I wanted to talk about first. Foreigners as one big, conglomerate group, so to speak. Doesn't necessarily matter where they're from, right? Even foreigners who's in their home nations are at war with each other, when they're in Britain, will act in ways that would be very, very perplexing. Unless you can see that, maybe because they're foreigners, when it comes to somebody who they might see as a mutual enemy, all of a sudden then, a minus times a minus is a plus. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Right? That's what we seem to be seeing in Britain at the moment. It's weird. You have all of these different foreign groups who, at the same time on Britain's soil, mind, will, when their war intensifies off in their homelands, they'll have these little ethnic conflicts on the streets of Britain who nobody asked for, right? But yet, when it comes to issues like this, an Indian judge trying deliberately to hide the quote-unquote asylum seeker nature of a Pakistani rapist who raped, and I don't like it when the media does this, because it is technically true, but it's used in headlines to, and it almost got me, right, when I made my initial post about this. It says they raped a teenage girl, which is not wrong. But instantly when you think of a teenage girl, right, as far as I know, the victim in this case, which doesn't make it any better necessarily, or lessen the blow, the victim in this case was 18. So not what you think. When you hear teenager, you still think child, right? You still hear somebody who's maybe 13 to 16 is usually where you would think of a teenager. Because, we have the legal cutoff for an adult in the UK is 18. So at that point, you usually use adult to refer to those people. Right? And 17, because you can learn to drive in the UK when you're at 17 and all these other things, you start sort of transitioning your terms around that point. At least that's the way that it's been in my experience. When I think, I see a headline, like the one we're going to be reading in a moment, which is, teenage girl raped in park or whatever it is, right? Teenage girl sexually assaulted. I'm thinking like 13, 14, right? So again, I don't like it, when the media does that for their own, attention and to generate clicks. I understand why, obviously, but this is the case in question now. It emerged in the Daily Mail today that a judge ordered jury not to be told that a Pakistani national who raped a teenage girl in a park was an asylum seeker. So again, the victim, I believe, I'm just trying to see if it confirms the victim's age in this article, but I'm not sure if it confirms the victim's age in this article. I have seen it in another post that I believe she was 18 I believe she was 18 at the time. I'm just trying to find it a moment. Again, it's designed to be deliberately inflammatory, but again, when you see things like teenager, you have a certain kind of a expectation, so to speak, right? Yeah. So I read it now, but yeah, the 18-year-old woman was raped in Sutton in Ashfield, Nottinghamshire, by a 28-year-old Pakistani asylum seeker, which is already a bit of an oxymoron. Given you'd have a very, very difficult case, case to make that you were a genuine asylum seeker coming from Pakistan. But the interesting point, which I want to get into more than anything, is really about the judge, right? So I suppose the only real thing that you could say that maybe you could be an asylum seeker from Pakistan for is that I don't think it's really active at the moment, but there was that bit of furore between India and Pakistan that went up a little while ago. But again, nothing that on the scale that we've seen in other wars anywhere else that have generated, masses of refugees and asylum seekers and all of these things, right? So already making the case very, very difficult that you could be a genuine asylum seeker coming from Pakistan, right? Because we all know at this point, everybody already knows, is willing to be honest about this. The asylum seeker system is just another facet of the immigration system. At least that's the way our political leaders are saying it. That might make you uncomfortable, right? But that's the way our political leaders are viewing it, because they want nothing but votes, right? They want nothing but votes. And they'll call people asylum seekers to instantly disarm people. It's a rhetorical disarming tactic. It means that instantly this person is oppressed and they need this assistance and everything like this, to skirt around the fact that they just want as many people in the country as possible to try and overthrow the democratic rights of the native people as possible and replace them as a native population, especially getting to the point where they are a massive, massive minority, because in case you didn't know, minorities are a lot easier to enslave, right? It's nothing less than treason, as we know. And putting foreigners in any kind of position over our law, and especially in political positions of power and all of these things where they consistently act in their own interests, is nothing less than treason as well. But you've got to take into account, it was their own political leaders in many instances that enabled the takeover of their own communities, and they were more than happy to sacrifice their own constituents to do it. That's why it's treason, by the way. But this is the case. Judge ordered jury not to be told that a Pakistani national who raped a teenage girl in a park was an asylum seeker. This is reported from the Daily Mail. An MP who unmasked an asylum seeker rapist has insisted the public deserve the truth after his immigration status was hidden. The truth obviously being the sword, the one sword that's like the kryptonite of this tyrannical regime, right? Which is why they try to distort it and change it so much, right? Key principle in 1984. I know I've missed out on 1 week. We'll be getting back on that as soon as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you've checked out my Wrong Speak series on Spotify and the other areas if you haven't done so already, to get the lowdown on why this is important. Pakistani national Shiraz Malik was 28, found guilty of raping a vulnerable teenage girl whom he and a friend pounced on in a park in the constituency of Reform MP Lee Anderson. Remember that one of the two I believe it was Pakistani as well, quote-unquote asylum seekers that came all across the thing. That he came from a middle-class background, essentially. He was wearing designer clothes and all the rest of it. Two of them that led that defenseless young girl away and subjected her to unspeakable atrocity as well. Seems like a very, very similar thing. Only difference is this person was slightly older, right? 18 years of age. Mr. Anderson first exposed Malik as an asylum seeker last year after he was arrested for targeting an 18-year-old woman when she was alone in Sutton in Ashfield, Nottinghamshire. This is the perplexing thing. However, a judge stopped the public from being told about the rapist's asylum status by gagging the press from reporting it until the end of his trial. Can now be revealed. A deliberate act of censorship to obfuscate the truth. A judge, mind you, the one who's meant to be laying down the verdict based on the truth, based on justice, right? A jury on Monday convicted Malik of 2 counts of rape after just a few hours of deliberation. Must have just been, open and shut case, right? Luckily he was, because we saw in the case, which we'll get onto in a moment later, which is again why we should be caring about the demographics of our communities even more. It could have been just incompetence, obviously. We'll go over the story a little bit later. Like we saw in the Ricky Jones trial, where he was acquitted despite the fact that it was caught on video. A grooming gang trial was recently collapsed due to jurors sharing information in a WhatsApp chat, I believe. We'll get onto that a little bit later. It's absolutely disgusting. The distraught victim even begged a friend via text to please help me as she was preyed upon by the men, jurors were told. Malik was living in taxpayer-funded accommodation at the time, having spent periods in Italy, Germany and France before arriving in the UK. After the verdict, Mr. Anderson said, "It's obvious that the police and the whole judiciary were very reluctant to allow the public the true identity of this vile creature." I wish they would write these a little bit better. It should have been public to know the true identity of this vile creature. The public deserves better, which is why I exposed the truth. You want to be careful doing that, because that's liable for criminalisation of itself. What did you notice about the fucking judge? What did you notice about the judge, guys? She's a foreigner. She's a foreigner herself. As far as I'm aware, she moved initially to the UK from India when she was 2, and then spent most of her formative years in India. Great, isn't it? Great. Judge Nirmal Shant has imposed a reporting restriction, postponing publication of Shiraz Malik's immigration status till the end of the trial. So we don't just have the case, like in the case of Tracy Lloyd Clark, for example, of native, presumably native anyway, right, judges who will lock people up for social media posts, right, despite letting, you know, child rapists go free with suspended sentences and stuff like that, right? We also now have foreigners who will try to, again, hide what will be damaging to the narrative which would benefit said foreigners, right? To try and, you know, discredit, to try and just any little way that they can weaken the growing nationalist sentiment, which when it comes out like this, again, the Streisand effect, you try to cover something up, but it's only going to get even bigger. It's only going to make that nationalist response even bigger. People are going to get angrier and angrier, right? Liken this to the late stages of the Weimar Republic, ladies and gentlemen. You should really be caring about that. And no matter what side of the fence you fucking fall on, right? Don't be a fence sitter. One thing I will say, regardless of what fucking side of this fence you fucking fall on, do not be a fence sitter. Do not forget who owns the fence, right? Think of it as an analogy, not necessarily to what we've seen that, but think of it as an analogy between good and evil. Think of it between, you know, the argument for Christianity, for example, Pascal's wager. Right, think of it between Pascal's wager. On one side, you have this glorious, you know, heaven in the afterlife, all of this stuff. If Christianity is true, right, you have God, you have Jesus Christ beckoning you over, right. And on the other side, you have the darkness, you have hell, you have the devil, etc. And you know, you just think, oh well, I don't know which side is true, right? You can't know necessarily, right? Both of them could be mirages, might not exist at all. But you're going to sit on the fence. You're going to be undecided until, you know, the last possible moment. The last possible moment, right? So you sit on the fence. This is a nice little story which was told to me once. I really, really like this. And then all of a sudden you just see the light from the one side fade, and it all recedes back. And the next thing you know, you're starting to be surrounded by darkness. Or the darkness from the other side is expanding onto you. It's like, whoa, wait, I didn't vote for this. I didn't want this. I sat on the fence. And the devil is going to come up to you and say, in this example, but again, this is the biggest thing, where you're going to be grouped in with one side or another if you sit on the fence, right? Because indecision is a decision. The devil's going to come up to you and say, you forgot who owns the fence. You forgot who owns the fence. It's a little bit like you watch a crime happen. Now, again, you're not committing a crime. But by letting one happen, by sitting on the fence and seemingly not doing anything, that's still your decision. And there's still going to be consequences of that. So I'm not saying you need to go all the way to one side or all the way to the other, but if you are just sitting back right now, sitting back on this fence or whatever, as these issues get more and more and more pressing in the modern day, just because you don't want to take them seriously, you don't want to confront them honestly, you don't want to have true, honest conversations with people who might have different opinions with you on this, particularly if you're one of these people that's terrorizing Minnesota and other areas right now, right? If you support them, just think, just honestly think about it. Just don't be led down the garden path either way mindlessly. And then don't choose to sit on the fence, right? But that being said, keep listening, keep engaging, honestly. Listen to as many viewpoints as you can, right? I think, you know, I think I'm quite clear on these issues, quite clear on my position. A lot of the positions that I hold, I don't actually want to, right? They actually make me feel very, very uncomfortable, but the truth will often make you feel uncomfortable. It was actually a comment that was left on one of my YouTube videos the other day, where the reality of the Great Replacement has made many people change in their emotional state for ways that they actually don't really like, right? And they've come to those opinions, they've come to those views via independent research, and oftentimes very, very arduous looking in the mirror, trying to rationalize things, hearing more and more perspectives, trying to weigh them morally. All of these things, doing very, very honest work in the shadows where you'll never see it, right? You don't put this kind of stuff on Front Street or anything like that. This is the kind of comment which I'm talking about. I want to read it a bit quick because it was almost like something straight out of my inner monologue, right? I just want to see if I can find it. Where is it? I'm not going to be able to find it now, am I? Hang on. Okay, let me see if I can put it on here. Because I know it was quite a recent exchange that I had. Here we go. So this was an exchange. Somebody put this on one of my shorts for Josh Fernie about a week ago. And it says, the Great Replacement has also changed many people's personalities. I, for one, have hardened my attitude to sob stories, become less empathetic and more dismissal. I hate that this has happened to me, and I can't see me changing back into the sweet and kind and thoughtful empath that I once was, because this is survival. Yeah, no shit. Animals change. I'm not saying that to be disrespectful to this person, right? This is a repeat commenter of mine whom I appreciate very, very dearly, right? As I appreciate all of you. This is survival. That's what a lot of people don't tend to realize, right? It's not just prosperity. This is survival in the only land that we have. And because of this, like a dog backed into a corner, no surprise it starts snarling and biting, even if it might be the friendliest creature if you don't put it in that situation, right? And not have any of these things that people term as racist and all of these things, these developed behaviors that have come as a result of it. Similarly, people now adopt these positions because they realize that, oh, holy shit, no, there's an actual genocidal threat that's being waged against the native population of these isles, right? And all across Europe and all across the Western world. By treasonous leaders operating on foreign interests to sell those people out. Globalism. I sort of had this thought when I came up in the shower, when I was having a shower earlier, and it was, what is globalism? How can you describe globalism? I just had this thought, like the way if I was asked to describe it at the moment, I haven't verbalized this yet. I kept repeating it while I was over and over in the show because I knew I didn't want to forget it. It's basically the exploitation of the lowest people in society, and usually the lowest people in societies outside of the country in question. So think of, in order to profit from foreign slave labor, Britain selling off all of its industries, moving all of its jobs overseas so that they can make use of Chinese and Indian slave labor and all the rest of it, right? For pennies on the pound or pennies on the dollar if you're in America and stuff like that, right? And they've done that in order to dispossess power and wealth the people of lower on the socioeconomic and power hierarchies in their own nations, the middle and lower classes, to dispossess them of wealth and power because they get less jobs, right? And all of a sudden they're getting taxed all out the fucking wazoo. Everything is tax going up, tax going up, tax going up. Public services going up, business is shutting down, right? Not to mention COVID, which was one of the biggest things that the World Economic Forum, by the way, if you didn't see, basically come out and said COVID was a social responsibility test. Yeah, people lost family members, people lost businesses, people lost lives, all of this stuff, right? Had this experimental frigging shot, which, clotted up people's veins like it was something like the frigging alien movies, right? Like it was a xenomorph growing inside their frigging veins, right? Can't imagine the undertakers that were left with PTSD after that shit, the kind of stuff that they were pulling out. Me and Catherine talk about this as well, by the way, in our conversation. Make sure you go and use those codes or the links down below to go and get your early access. You don't want to miss it. You certainly don't want to miss it when it comes out this Friday. You certainly don't want to miss it when it comes out this Friday. It's one of those conversations, 2.5 hours, that it just went like that, and it could have gone a lot longer. But in order to dispossess their lower native peoples, the treasonous politicians and so on, and the especially the big executives and the heads of big corporations that benefit from massively reduced cost of labor, right? That's why they actually drive up the minimum wage a lot of times, because they know it's going to put small businesses out of business, right? You think somebody wanted to start up a local cafe or whatever it is going to be able to pay £15 minimum wage or whatever it is for long, or £12 minimum wage for long? Like they're talking about $30 minimum wages in America. It cripples and destroys small businesses, which are once the lifeblood of the high street, right? Globalism exploiting either the lowest in the socioeconomic hierarchy in one's own nation directly, like in the cases of China and so on, or then other nations exploiting those same slaves all the more in order to, again, dispossess. Usually in Britain, it's going to be to dispossess the power and wealth of the people under, equity equalizes downwards, of everyone under them, the middle and lower classes, right, to force them into line. Because you remove them with the power and you remove the wealth from them, they can't, if you decide to launch a spurious case against them, they can't have the funds to fight it. For example, if you decide not to affirm your kid's gender, as we'll talk about later on, if a Plaid government get the power, they'll just send the state to come after you. If you can't fight it financially, well, good luck to you. Good luck to you. And also then they'll remove your power in terms of your vote. Because at the same time, they will flood your country with a bunch of those people in enough numbers to remove any kind of recourse that you have to solve your problems democratically. If that isn't a fight for your very survival, I don't know what is. And you wonder why many people start becoming racist. They did not wake up one day and all of a sudden start Sieg Heiling and Romans saluting, right? By the way, even the sea lions have started doing that now, so you really should start paying attention. Bring that clip up if I remember a little bit later. It's just a rather, funny, humorous clip, if you will, right? If you haven't gone through at least a very, very arduous thought process, right, and really seen things for the way that they are, I've laid out the most truthful case that I can really try to, and there's many others that do a better job of it than me, right? You've got many other political commentators that speak about things in a lot more educated ways than I do. Researchers, Lewis Brackpool, for example, seems to be doing tremendous work with Freedom of Information Act requests and his research that he's doing, right? Others as well. If you really, whenever you see discussions like this, and instantly you shut off and you start using labels and you start using all of these things, right? And I don't think whenever I've used labels like communist or whatever, globalist, it's been very, very accurate, right? Those people say they want a global society of global citizens. Well, that makes them a globalist, right? But the left will do it. They'll call anybody with a modicum of even conservative values, not conservative in the sense of the Conservative Party, right? Or, I mean, we called, the conservatives at some point, but I suppose we should just start calling them reform at this point, because that's basically what they are, right? Suella Braverman and I've forgotten his bloody name. Robert Jenrick defected from Tory 1.0 to Tory 2.0. What can you say, right? The very people that were in charge of one of the worst catastrophes in modern history, right? The Boris wave and stuff like that have now been put into prominent positions within reform, and Nigel Farage is building literally Tory Party 2.0. Question is, do we think that those people actually changed and are actually going to do the best for Britain, or do we think that they're just going to sell us out again? These people have a very good track record of selling us out, Nigel Farage being no exception, right? If you haven't done, if you shut down and start using labels and all of these things, the minute these conversations come up, you're doing yourself a disservice. And I don't want you to be one of those people that's caught on the fucking fence, right? I don't want you to be one of those people that were if in an hour and we're not sure, and we're caught on the fence, because just don't forget who owns the fence. All right? Just don't forget who owns it. But this is survival. Make no mistake. This is survival. And don't think that many people who've come to the positions that even I have now, and there's people out there that would you'd argue that have more extreme opinions than me, right? Many of them did not come to this just because they woke up one day and all of a sudden they decided they wanted everyone out that didn't look like them or whatever, right? And they just, because of people's skin color or whatever it was, they just hated people and wanted them all to even be expelled off the face of the planet. Not the case. Been a very, very arduous process, and it's been hard for many people to look themselves in the mirror with how they've changed. Right? But survival will do that to you. Survival will do that to you. And if you think that one of those people that just because your community doesn't look like Telford or Oldham or Blackburn or wherever else right now with the associated atrocities, the same people, the same political bent, the same initiatives are put in place, that will happen. And in an area like Wales, where it's a very, very small population, it will happen a lot worse. One of the prominent political commentators we'll get onto at the end of the show will make that case very, very well, far better than I ever could. But a little bit more info for you, though, ladies and gentlemen. I think it'd be important for you to, understand if you want a bit of a brief, concise summary of the Indo-Pakistan conflicts, which is quite interesting, right? Whenever these nations start to flare up again, you start seeing the flare-ups on British soil, right? In theory, a lot of those people should be going back and fighting back home if they care about it so much, right? But from 1947, the British partition of India, which created a Hindu majority India and a Muslim majority Pakistan amid communal violence, it actually killed 2 million people. The primary flashpoint has been the disputed region of Jammu and Kashmir, a Muslim-majority princely state whose Hindu ruler, or Hindi ruler, I think it's called Hindi, whatever it is, Hindi, don't give a fuck, ceded to India amid invasion by Pakistani tribesmen, leading to ongoing territorial claims, cross-border terrorism allegations, and nuclear tensions. Other factors include water-sharing disputes, e.g. the Hindu Waters Treaty, ethnic insurgencies, and multiple accusations of state-sponsored militancy. You had obviously conflicts in 1947 to 1948. That was known as the First Kashmir War. You had the Second Kashmir War in 1965, 1971, Bangladesh Liberation War, 1984, Siachen conflict, right? Dispute over the uninhabited Siachen Glacier. 1999 Kargil War, 2001 to 2002 standoff, Mumbai attacks in 2008, 2016 to 2018 escalations where there was an Uri attack, killed 19 Indian soldiers, and India conducted surgical strikes across the LOC, where that is actually referring to. 2019, the Balakot airstrikes, and then a 2025 conflict triggered by the April 2022 Pahalgam attack, killing 26 mostly Hindi tourists, blamed on Pakistan-backed groups like the Resistance Front. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was actually a couple of other citizens that were killed in that attack as well. A couple of British citizens as well, I believe. So fair to say, these types of people don't actually like each other very much. But when it comes to Britain, right, when it comes to where they seem to have a mutual enemy, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter if he's Pakistani or whatever, it doesn't matter if he's a quote-unquote asylum seeker, and that might actually, again, provide more fuel to the fire of the nationalist narrative, which in many instances is just a survival narrative to save the British people, right, from colonization and subjugation. People who would have a vested interest in the colonization and minoritization and elimination, right, of the replacement of the British people. Funny how all of a sudden those interests align despite all manner of different things, different conflicts going on back home. Quite funny how that is, isn't it? Another reason we might question the, I suppose we might say, integrity, I guess. Well, courts, this was a depressing headline that broke today, or yesterday actually, that a man raped a woman next to a court building. This is great. Right outside one of the courts of justice in the UK, namely at Portsmouth Crown Court, literally next to it, you had this horrific crime taking place with, yet again, another foreigner. Person by the name of Mubarak Ibrahim is on trial at Portsmouth Crown Court, accused of the alleged rape in June last year. Ed Hand prosecuting told the jury that the defendant and the complainant were captured on CCTV walking out of shot for about 5 minutes in the vehicle bay of this building. Ibrahim, 25, is also accused of voyeurism by filming the incident on his mobile phone. He denies the offences. So apparently we have now, according to this article, to bring it up on screen, evidence from the perp himself of this incident taking place. Obviously he's pleading not guilty or whatever, but he actually filmed this incident on his phone, and this was as they were emerging from the vehicle bay, or they were walking out of the vehicle bay at least, of a court of justice. So evidently it's not just inside the court of justice where the very judges, the people presiding over it, are the ones facilitating the injustices, as we see a lot of the time. It's often being done right outside as well. Just right outside. There's absolutely no words. Absolutely no words. The jury members to be taken to the scene of the incident in a site visit, the court heard, I would ordinarily not tell you to go to the location, but in this case it's just at the back of the building and it would be utterly pointless. You can see most of it from your jury retiring room. Could you imagine how nuts that would have been? Say you had a trial for a different crime that was going on in that jury retiring room, where presumably they retire for deliberation. And imagine if you could just look down and just see this incident taking place. You think, wow, this is a broken country. Or sorry, this is a bastion of multicultural utopian ideals. This is a bastion of tolerance and diversity. This is. If you're wondering what the overall trends of rape and stuff like that in the UK look like, by the way, they don't look any better. A number of police recorded, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, police recorded rape incidents, rape offences from England and Wales from 2002 to 2025. What do you notice? Stable for a while, at least. Obviously, there's never really been a period in history where rapes just do not happen, right? They happen as a result of conquest, right? Different types of conquest. By the way, those who are, like in the Andrew Gold debate, liken a lot of the things in how, Britain has changed, right? And they liken it to, invasions of the past, really not realizing that obviously then trying to combat the nationalist narrative, they realize it doesn't exactly have a lot of substance to their argument, right? People saying that remigration would constitute ethnic cleansing and or genocide, right, of Britain. What was immigration in the first place then? What was immigration in the first place then? And this has been largely the fruits of it. We've seen that in many instances, the graphs that we've talked about before from Restore Britain, how many of the ethnic minority groups are massively overrepresented, even some areas of Europe as well, massively overrepresented per capita stats in sexual assault and rape offences in London, for example. Afghanistan, way at the top of the list. And you have other places, I believe, like Eritrea and... another one was Algeria as well. Was another big one I remember being at the top of the list, right? In many instances being over 10 times, right? Over 10 times more likely than a British person to commit these crimes. And ever since we've become more tolerant, right? More focused on restorative justice, more focused on trying to preserve the multicultural utopia, these are the fruits of it. And they say as much as well. People in elected positions will openly say as much. Also, when you have this person being confronted, in this instance, I believe this is in Crowborough. Pertinent issue raised by a resident at a public meeting hosted by Crowborough Town Council for residents with the Home Office last November. Presumably when talk of this would have been first, coming in, because now Crowborough has just seen a massive influx of these migrant men into their community by nightfall. So again, silent invasion by nightfall continues. And if you think, as John Carr said in our interview, it's not going to come for every little town and hamlet, ladies and gentlemen. If you've been denying the evidence of your eyes and ears that you see every single day with how you see your community changing, so you won't think of how this could mean for your freedoms, for your future, especially for your kids' and grandkids' future, right? Start thinking about it. Basically, don't sit on the fence. But he was asked, how do you intend to meet the sexual needs of 600 men? How do you intend to meet the sexual needs of 600 men? And Andrew Larter, I believe his name is, of the Home Office, said, well, I'll just play his response for you.
Next to him, and then Jack, can we come to the two ladies at the back? Sir first.
Yeah. How do you plan to meet the sexual needs of 600 men?
Andrew, did you hear the question?
Yeah, I said I don't.
Okay. Gentleman in the black.
So, I don't know if you'll be able to hear the clapping at the asking of that question. You can clearly see the way the public is swaying, right? And that's where you need to be looking at yourself, right? If you're still using the labels and all of these things without even thinking about it, think of the way that the public is swaying, right? Not saying that everybody within, not saying just because loads of people go there and there's a consensus that something means it's correct, right? But then that's where you put in all of the other evidence as well. But it's evidence that a lot of people are using their eyes. A lot of people are seeing the same thing. Imagine before, when all you had before would have been witness testimony, that it would be corroborated by more people saying the same thing, right? So when a lot of people do say something, that is reason to pay attention to it. So when he asked this question, how do you plan to meet the needs, the sexual needs of 600 men, right? That how the audience clapped, right? Presumably, hopefully it won't be taken out by the audio improvement software that I use, but he literally, the audience starts just clapping, right? Initially, it sounds like they're going to start booing and jeering, but they start clapping. They're happy that this question is being asked, right? And he just rather limply just says, I don't. And what many people have taken this, I think rightfully so, is this is a rather obvious admission that the intention is just to let these men go and do whatever the fuck they want. As men, migrant origin, have done from the moment they have set foot here. And the police either turned a blind eye, they threatened victims to send them back to their abusers, they got involved with it themselves, right? And not just migrant men either, as you have cases in Wales of it being ignored, in the case of Ian Watkins, obviously, and in the case of Peter and Avril Griffiths, right? Crowborough men in this instance, and every single man everywhere that is seeing what's going on and understanding what it means, right? Understanding what it means for your community. Understand that's the Home Office, a representative of the Home Office, saying that the Home Office has no intention on doing anything, right? Presumably, they won't even be able to access, illicit sites online anymore, right? Because they'll have to provide some kind of ID check or whatever. And obviously, we know that these people being here are the very reason that they're trying to crack down with these draconian ID laws anyway, these digital ID laws and so on. They're literally planning to put our women, our girls, in the line as sexual cannon fodder, as they have done for generations now, in the pursuit of their political goals. And they don't seem to feel any remorse about it. The biggest thing you can do at this point, guys, especially if you're a female, is start doing things that you can to start taking matters into your own hands. And that goes for everybody. Not using services like Uber anymore. Not using eating takeaway delivery services anymore. So there's a poor woman in Scotland that suffered a miscarriage because delivery driver forced his way into her home and raped her so violently, it seems, that not long after she ended up miscarrying. She was pregnant at the time, and she ended up miscarrying. I can't remember what company he was working for at the time. I can't even remember if the news organization that I was reading it from, or the news organizations at the time, reported who he was, but he was a delivery driver. Where possible as well, you have to think about who's delivering your Amazon parcels, stuff like that. Amazon being one of these big, massive conglomerates that would massively benefit from the reduced cost of labor that mass immigration brings. So you need to start thinking about all these things at the very least. And if you're going to go get a McDonald's, for example, just for God's sake, drive in the car and go get it yourself. Seriously, just put in that little bit of sacrifice at the very least. Best you can do is obviously support local produce, support local business, buy local and cook your own food. That's obviously the best thing that you can do, at least most of the time. I'm not saying you don't want to go have, McDonald's and other this, you call it slop if you want. But again, not saying you can't go and have that, but at the very least, go and drive to get it. Don't take these risks anymore. Try and avoid taxis wherever possible. I'm sorry, you're going to have to do some kind of profiling at some point. You're going to have to do some kind of profiling if you want to stay alive. So I know horror stories of people that have, gotten in taxis and stuff like that, and the next thing you know, they're having to fight for their life against 3 or 4 people that have bundled into the taxi as well, deliberately, because the driver has driven to a place in order to pick these people up in order to go and do heinous things. If you think it's not happening, it is. And just have to think right now. Try and silence your mind for a moment. If you think it's not happening somewhere right fucking now, this second you're watching this or listening to this, I guarantee you it is. Guarantee you it is. And somewhere a politician is turning a blind eye to it. Right? This is one example. that emerged recently, which made me say, look, it was lucky that the woman in this instance basically was up against a, one of these imports, it seems, that was essentially malnourished and was probably around the same weight category as her. And in a way, that's kind of lucky because there's only one mitigating equalizer, right? She managed to fend off the would-be predators. And luckily, she managed to escape with at least only a semi-traumatic incident, right? So I'm not sure where this is from. It's from an news organization called News 24. I believe it's shared by an account that was in the States, but I don't know if this was actually in the States. I have no idea. But this is the video. I'll bring it up on screen now. I'll just see if I can hear the voices in the background of the video to see if I can find out where the accent is from. Not sure, but I'll play the video anyway, and you can see for yourself. This is it's nothing less than terrifying, and that's why you should be, avoiding these services like the plague, because they're actively profiting from it as well.
I had my phone in my hand. Actually, I cracked my screen guard by squeezing my phone so tight, and I had my handbag. Normally it's over my shoulder, but I just had it like between my head, like clutched it like this. And yeah, he just kind of tried to push me toward the car. So he actually didn't even try to take my phone. And the next thing, the door flung open and there was a man inside that tried to pull me in. And he just said, "You're coming with us tonight, lady." And luckily I'm strong. So I just elbowed him and wriggled around toward the back of the car, but screaming. And what came over me was this lion's roar. I didn't scream from my throat. I screamed from my belly, and I didn't.
So she got very, very lucky. From what I can understand, where this appears to be would not be an uncommon occurrence. News 24, from what I can understand, mainly focuses on South African news. So the actual website itself, if you just type in news24.com, in this instance, one of its biggest tabs, right, the first tab that comes up. And I'm even doing this on an American VPN as well, so I don't think this is even just based in America. Not sure 100% where it is based, but it has an entire tab dedicated to South African news, which, unless the actual news station was based in South Africa, you think would be very, very, interesting, right? So yeah, News 24 is an English language South African news website. So this is an example of things that go on every single day. This is an example of what the people cheering on when they shout, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer, persecute the whites." This is exactly what they're talking about. You know, the horror stories that come from the white farmers who've been subjected to all manner of atrocities at the hands of these black militias and so on, right? Fruits of Nelson Mandela, basically. These are the fruits of it. Luckily, in this instance, she was able to fight. She was able to fight them off because the guy, it seemed, only was about, I don't know, probably weighed even less than her, right? And even though she said she was very strong, this and that, the reality is, this is the exception. A lot of people, a lot of feminists in particular, and even a lot of the people that want to then probably go down the trans route afterwards, say that, oh, look, this is an example of strong, independent women and all the rest of it. If there'd even been a weight match or even just a slight increase of muscle on the other guy's part, or if the guy in the car was actually able to grab a hold of her, this would have been a very, very different story. Make no mistake about it. This is not the rule. This is the exception to the rule. And she didn't get lucky, obviously, with who turned up to, who turned up to take her to wherever she's going to go. She was going to go see a friend, from what the poster says, right? This is the exception, not the rule, right? Stories that I've heard where people have been lucky to escape, right? This is the exception, not the rule. I'm just trying to see if I can find my post on it, but it doesn't seem to want to bring it up. But just to keep yourself safe, right? From what I can tell, it's not an AI video like anything like that. I think somebody just highlighted the Pixar thing in the corner, trying to imply that this entire video is AI. If it is, that's just another, thing to talk about with regards to AI and the really, really scary point where we find AI in the future where we won't be able to differentiate fiction from reality, right? Where just somebody putting a prompt into Grok or somebody putting a prompt into any other kind of AI video generation service, that they can just, in truly Orwellian fashion, right, manufacture anything that they want out of history, right? And the biggest thing that Chapter 4, Part 1 of 1984 points out is that you can make people exist, you can make events and whatever else exist in the past with the same authenticity as events that actually happened with just the right fabrication of data, like fake photographs, fake videos, all of these things, and news articles written and dated to a certain period of time. You could bring something to life, right, that never ever would have happened in the past record just by manipulation of data in the present day. So that would be the case. If this is an AI video, and I don't believe it is because it looks like home camera footage that's recorded on a phone, right? That's what it looks like. But I don't know. I don't know. If it is an AI video, it is extremely convincing. And it's got the News 24 watermark on there, so I would massively be suspecting that this is real video, and this is stuff that goes on every single day, and our politicians will turn a blind eye to it because it's actually useful for their agenda, right? Because the more people feel unsafe, the more they'll be able to then be offered the solution, which is digital ID for your safety, digital slavery for your safety. Resist, stand up, resist. Understand that the only way in areas like Britain that we're going to get out of it is with remigration, unfortunately. And that's just the reality. Remigration is simply preserving this generation and the future generations of the native peoples of Britain and the native peoples of Europe. That's what it is. It's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite of what many people would believe it is. And the number one thing it is an affront to, the number one thing it is in opposition to, is government initiative. A lot of people that will support remigration don't necessarily hate people for where they're from or what they look like or anything like that. But they will understand that large parts of them have been loaded into a gun that even they didn't realize that they were being loaded into, that was fired into the back of the native peoples of these countries by their treasonous leaders, by the suits and ties. Right? But those bullets have got to be removed as well if the wounds are going to heal, unfortunately. How far back that goes, that's a matter for debate. That's a matter for debate. There's many people that go even further back than, Windrush, which was really the first generation where trouble started to happen, right? There was very, very small pockets of non-British people in Britain at that time. Very, very, very small pockets. But everything has exponentially increased since Windrush. So I would say that that would be a logical point of conversation. And maybe that would be the point which things would need to be reverted back to. Right? But again, that's a matter for debate. But the one thing that really isn't debatable is that you haven't had any of these developments towards digital ID, digital slavery, and all of these other things, cracking down on hate speech, quote unquote, and all of these things. They have come hand in hand with immigration, and immigration has been the primary weapon used, right? Like Muslims say, the greatest weapon that they have is the woman's womb, right? It's been a slow genocide campaign, in my opinion, at least from the very start, from Windrush. I got a feeling even politicians back then had a feeling they knew what they were doing. They knew instinctively that they didn't need to let these people land here. So whoever's prime minister at the time, I think it was Wilson, was going to send the ship away and then seemingly backtracked on that for whatever reason. It's been a concerted campaign since then, from my opinion, because the rewriting of history goes all the way back to Windrush, most definitely. And maybe even people have questions about things that even predate Windrush, narratives about World War II, and so on. You should be opening yourself up to really trying to understand those perspectives and really letting them come in, not just believing everything you see on face value, right? But really understanding where they're getting their information from, vetting, is it true, is it reliable? Really asking questions about what you've been taught. You need to ask questions about what you've been taught so that you can discern truth from fiction. Even if you're a person like me and doesn't necessarily believe that you've been lied to about everything, about history, as many others do, you need to be willing to hear those perspectives out in order for you then to critique and compare and to really analyze them for yourself, to trust your logical faculties, right? You need to have the information, often from both sides and many other different viewpoints in between, in order to see the evidence, in order to make sure evidence isn't being omitted. It's one of the biggest things that people are angry about. Often lies by omission, right? The biggest point for this video, and this is what we just talked about here, stop using these services. Stop using these services. Stop rewarding these companies for creating things like this. Taxi companies, right? Unless you know the person who, say, owns, because we have like local taxi companies that are run by local people, right? In areas like mine. Unless you know like the owner and the people that, and you know, you're contributing to, you know, like a local business that way. Okay, fair enough. Right. If you know they can be trusted. But certain places, like cities, for example, where you have had these massive changes and where it's more corporate and they don't really care about who's driving the taxis, don't really care about what happens, right? They're just looking at as profit and loss statements. Maybe start to rethink a lot of your choices, especially food delivery companies, right? Especially takeaway delivery companies massively. And transport like Uber and people like that. Even if it's just because they won't care unless they feel it in their wallets. They won't care unless they feel it in their wallets. They have no compassion for people like this woman who very, very, very nearly was subjected to, you don't even want to think about it, what she could have been subject to, especially in an area like South Africa where they don't just commit these heinous crimes of rape and sexual assault, but they probably subjected to some really brutal murder afterwards, right? The horror stories from the Plasmod. They don't care. They don't care. They're getting to pay workers less and they're getting to make more money. They're not going to do it unless they start feeling it in a way where they don't get the money anymore and they stop being rewarded in that way. You need to start treating them like spoiled children, basically. You need to start treating them like spoiled children and, you know, ground them for a little while, at the very least. Maybe permanently. Maybe don't forget the betrayal that they pulled. Okay, speaking of betrayal, something which could very well be a betrayal, I don't know, haven't read the full article yet, but I saw this, and best case scenario, it seems to be a case of gross incompetence on the part of the jury. At worst case, it could have been done deliberately to sabotage the trial. This is the trial of the Rochdale grooming gang, which was reported on 23rd of January this year. A trial collapsed after jurors set up a WhatsApp group to discuss the case. Right, now I'm no lawyer. I'd never been on jury duty. I can imagine that setting up some kind of decentralized communication outside the jury retiring room is just going to be something which you know instinctively off the bat that you're not supposed to do. In this example, we just had Signalgate in America, for example, where a bunch of people have been exposed for essentially being involved on their own chats, on their own signal, for essentially insurrectional activity. And admitting to it and realizing how much trouble they were in when all of this got exposed. Journalists like Cam Higby and amazing people out there have exposed this, right? It's been all over X the last couple of days with everything that's going on in Minnesota. True insurrectionary activity, right, what you could call terrorist activity, discussed in these chats. Admittances of it, because they admit about how fucked they are. They admit how fucked they are in these messages now that they've been exposed. Seems as something similar, who knows, could have happened here. I don't know if they have access to the specific communications themselves, but the Daily Mail reported that due to a WhatsApp group being set up, a grooming trial has now collapsed. A grooming gang trial in Rochdale, one of the hotbeds of this stuff, right, has now collapsed. Because jurors set up a WhatsApp group to discuss the case, the jury at Manchester Minshall, I'm not sure how to pronounce it exactly, Street Crown Court was hearing the case of 6 men accused of rape and other sexual offences against 2 teenage schoolgirls. So this is what we're talking about when I were talking about before about teenager, and it was referring to an 18-year-old girl. Presumably now we're talking about, again, girls who very well could have been, as young as 12, 13, somewhere around 13 to 16, right? That's kind of where we're talking about now, I would imagine, right? Where a lot of the hotbeds for this grooming stuff was taking place. I think the average age for the abuse has been about 14. Hearing the case of 6 men accused of rape and other sexual assault against 2 teenage schoolgirls in Rochdale, Greater Manchester between 2003 and 2006. The prosecution opened its case in October last year, but the trial was halted 2 months after one of the 12 jurors reported to court officials that several of them had messaged within the group about a broadcast on the topic of grooming gangs. In one exchange, a member warned other jurors not to broadcast, to which one responded, "I'm going to watch it anyway," followed by a smiley emoji. Another juror was also said to have messaged too that they would watch the broadcast. An investigation was launched and the entirety of the WhatsApp communications was examined by the judge. The pair who said they would watch it along with the rest of the jury were then questioned about the matter but said they had actually not viewed it. Defence barrister suggested the pair may not be telling the truth, and the prosecution invited the judge to further question the 2 jurors. Judge Corbett Jones declined to do so and granted defence applications to discharge the jury. He argued there were real concerns it was not following legal directions by conducting research into grooming gangs, and there was a risk that it could happen again. So presumably, the defence trying to play on this would be the defence for the groomers and rapists themselves. So what these jurors done, either deliberately or accidentally, I'm not sure if, with my logical faculty at the very least, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because of the smiley emoji. Oh, I'm going to do it. I'm going to flaunt my responsibility. I'd like to see the makeup of this jury, if you don't mind me asking. I'd maybe like to see the, ethnic and religious makeup of this jury. Maybe see who the 2 jurors are. I understand, obviously, for various reasons, they are kept under conditions of anonymity, right? Often given numbers as opposed to their names. I understand that, and I understand why. I've watched enough of Fear City and other mob documentaries where I know that they'll try and find out the identity of a juror so often they can go and bribe them and rig the trial. I understand that. Or they might even look to kill a member of the jury. Who knows, right? There's many different methods which can be done, right? So I know why they keep the jury anonymous, right? I'm not this uneducated person. It's like, release the jury information. No, I understand why. But it's worth considering. Who would be happy, it seems, to put this out there, to broadcast this out there, to have this chat, maybe in the back of their mind knowing it might affect the case and might cause it to collapse? Who would have that motivation? Top of my mind either comes to a suicidally empathetic white liberal woman, or someone of a certain community, certainly ethnic and religious connotations, that might be wanting to do other members of their community, who knows, they might have been indirectly involved in, a solid based on their own sectarian and in-group preferences. I wonder. There would be no reason why somebody with any kind of patriotic sentiment for Britain would want to obviously collapse a trial in this way. They would obviously take their obligations extremely seriously, right? So I don't know. Ultimately, I don't know if we'll ever know, obviously. But there would be a certain community and certain communities, certain initiatives that would be massively in favour of a trial into grooming gangs, right? 6 men collapsing. I'll let you do, a little bit of, Soviet math, because I'm trying to move away from the American term. So Soviet mathematics in your head as to who that community or communities may be. A retrial will now take place in August. The men in question, it seems, Tahir Rashid, Mohammed Salim, Iftak Hussein, Suklain Shah, all deny it. All deny the rape. Ashrad Mohammed, and then Amjad Mahmood. The lowest age of these men, by the way, is 45. Highest age being 55. So we have a 10-year spread of ages 45 to 55 in this instance. One of them also pleaded not guilty to the rape of another girl in the late 1980s. The late 1980s, when he would have been about 20 years younger. So, I suppose we'll see. I suppose we'll see what will happen in the retrial. But I can certainly imagine that it's, you know, more to this than meets the eye. And it's not just a case, this is just speculation on my part, it's not just a case of juror negligence and ignorance, if you will. That this was likely a concerted effort by certain members of that jury, given how much areas like Rochdale and that have changed demographically, culturally, right? This is the fruit. These are the fruits of becoming a global city, as Andy Burnham loves to tout, that he wants to turn Blivis Manchester into a global city. Stephen Crowder did a great video on global cities as well, by the way. If I remember to link it down below, you should go and watch it. It was a concerted effort to collapse the trial, to get their mates off, I would say. Whether the individual jurors knew the people or not, if they had affiliation with them being either part of the ethnic community or the religious community, why would we not think they would have acted in those interests, right? And not acted in the interests of the young girls and the British people. But hey, the not an upside, but the one thing is that things like this, if it does actually come out to be the case, it will only massively fuel the nationalist sentiment even more. Only massively fuel the nationalist sentiment even more. So will things like this. There was a 31-year-old man in Sydney recently. So you have one, seemingly at least, again, I have no real evidence to say that it was exactly this, but a trial for seemingly certain reasons being collapsed. And then you have another guy being dragged into jail, right? Literally due to ideology. So on one side, you potentially have a trial being collapsed because of certain ideologies. And on the other side, you have in Australia somebody being hauled into jail because of their ideologies. A Sydney man who's 31 years old who's been told he will stay in jail over his Australia Day speech. So a man was arrested for allegedly calling Jews the greatest enemy to this nation in an Australia Day speech. He's been refused bail by a magistrate due to his alleged political ideology. Alleged, mind you. In theory, because this guy is a white man, you would be thinking that he's a, national socialist wanting to gas them all, right? You never know, because you could have whites that are Muslims as well, and they have a bone to pick with the Jews as well. All of a sudden, when it's the Muslims that say it, like again, free Palestine, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which is a call for genocide against the Jews in Israel, right? Regardless of even if you don't like Israel and stuff like that, acknowledge the call for what it is. Right? Even if you say they should have nothing to do with Israel, they're not a friend of Britain, they're not a friend of Europe, don't even like Jews, whatever. Even if they were to be wiped off the face of the earth tomorrow, you wouldn't care. Right, okay, you can have all those opinions, but then don't go saying that the genocidal call isn't the genocidal call, right? Let's just have that. But he actually gets then refused bail. So you have, on the streets of Britain, as another contrast, and on the streets of Australia it would seem as well, you have organised, gangs of these people that don't even see a day inside of jail, because oftentimes their community will come outside to riot outside of it and throw things at the officers and throw things at the police station, as they did in Rochdale, I believe. You have this guy being refused bail, simply because of words. Simply because of words that, oh dear God, could cause offence, right? No matter whether those words are true or not, no matter whether those words are true or not. In fact, for the words to be offensive, usually they have to be perceived as somewhat true. Usually, right? I'm not saying that I support what he said. I'm not saying that I support what he says whatsoever, right? Again, this is where maybe you can ask the person why they think this way, right? From a genuine place of, I want to understand you. I want to understand how you got to this point. I understand that not everybody's life experience is the same as mine. Not everybody's view is the same as mine. How did you get to this point? Brandon Koshal, 31, addressed a large crowd at Moore Park during an open mic segment after the March for Australia rally on Monday, and allegedly said the government's new hate speech laws were pushed by Jewish lobby groups. So it seems that they said and alleged that he said that Jews are the greatest enemy to this nation. Apparently the quote is itself, "They were behind it all. The Jews are the greatest enemy to this nation. They always have been. They are an enemy to Western civilization, and for thousands of years, Christians and Anglos, the white man, has known that the Jew is our greatest enemy. Free Joel Davis, hail white Australia, and hail Thomas Sowell." Those are what his remarks are alleged to be. And certainly, funny thing is, one of the police officers arresting him, which I'll see if I can pull this footage up a bit quick. One of the police officers arresting him is wearing, it's almost like a weird kind of inversion of reality, almost, which I think is quite funny. Why is this video not working now? Only because, let me see if I can bring this video up. One of the officers arresting him is wearing a red armband that looks very distinctive. It's not the actual, NSDAP emblem, itself, right? That's not what it is. But here's the footage of him being led away, and you can see here, for example, the officer in this instance, like we talk about the increasing leftists bringing us a fascist regime, the officer not doing himself any favors as this guy is walked away. So this is Brandon Koshal, 31, who is alleged to have made remarks, the Jews are the enemies of the nation. They've been enemies of the white Western civilization, since all time, basically. And the guy arresting him, or one of the guys arresting him, see if I can just bring it back here. See the armband this guy's wearing, which you can see down the bottom of the screen, not doing the image of the state any favors. Let's just say that. But it was charging with publicly inciting hatred on the grounds of race, causing fear. So whatever way you want to cut it, this is the thing, right? It's kind of a point in his favor as to what he's saying. Because, as we spoke with the rabbi earlier, that there was the goal of uniting with the Muslims to combat anti-Semitism and Islamophobia against nationalist ideas that are building, right? Charlie Kirk himself, as we talked about in the intro to this episode, talking about many Jewish lobby groups being some of the most leftist, Marxist, pro-border organizations that there are, right? It's mad that many of those Jewish groups, if what he is to be said is to be believed, right, and I believe that Charlie was an honest man till the day that he died, that they were even calling him an anti-Semite. And Charlie being one of the most, pro-Israel people that really there ever were. You got a lot of stick from people on the right because of it. So for those who then would say that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes with certain groups who you're not being allowed to criticize or whatever, like the Streisand effect. This is the thing. This is where the authoritarian regime at this point is going to have to weigh up. Is it going to be worth their time in the future trying to go down and crack down on this more and more and more, which I would imagine their answer is going to be yes, right? More and more in this quote-unquote hate speech to stop people from speaking, right? It's going to then put more and more eyeballs on things like this. It's going to radicalize people more and more and more, right? Because even if you don't agree with this guy, if you don't say, or if you say something that anything the government deems as quote-unquote hate speech, it could be not in this instance against the Jews. What if it's, to combat trans ideology? What if it's to combat trans ideology? You have the same problem. Eventually, I suppose the government is going to have to make the choice of, is it worth going and trying to arrest numerous more amounts of people, right? Many people who don't agree with this guy will see that they're kind of in the same boat. Because the government views them as thought criminals all the same. Doesn't matter whether you're an ardent Jew hater, right? Or if you're not that way inclined, you might disagree with like the trans ideology and other stuff and just want, you know, basic immigration controls, or maybe just want all the illegal sent back or whatever. Well, that could be akin to racist hate speech as well. See what happens when you call everyone a Nazi, when you call everyone a fascist, when it isn't true? All of a sudden, then you have people realizing that, oh, I'm going to get called that thing anyway, so I'm in the same fight as these guys. And then you have more people that are going to move to that side. You might have some people out of fear and whatever else that will come back and cower in line. But I think, especially in Britain, more people are capable of courage than they realize. Right? And by definition, it's the coward that's capable of the greatest courage. So if you are scared, you have good reason to be, well, that presents you as well with good opportunities to potentially really keep doing good, hard, virtuous things. Doesn't necessarily mean going down the same route as this guy. What matters for this guy, and when you take into account what he said and interpret it, is the evidence that he has to support those claims, right? But if you arrest somebody without even allowing them to give their evidence or whatever, if you try to just shut them up by using the power of the state, that's going to make more people ask questions as to, why does that guy think that? I want to know more about that. There's not an insignificant amount of people that think the way that this guy does, right? They're not insignificant. And the more you see things like this, the more they're going to grow. The more they're going to grow. And certainly the more people you're going to see actually want to investigate it when they never would have thought to investigate it before. So we shall see. But we're at the point now where seemingly you've got certain groups of people collapsing trials in some areas of Britain. And for their remarks, then you have others being hauled into prison and kept into prison, denied bail, seemingly without trial. You have all this going on whilst you have unfettered demographic replacement, whilst you have all of the atrocities that we talked about, such as the rape, the rape of Britain, rape of Europe, even, right? Genocide by replacement, nothing less than genocide. You wonder why people start, not being worried about being called racist and all these things anymore. Not being worried about being called Islamophobic, transphobic, anti-Semitic. I'd just like to know if they're right. I'd just like to know if they're right, At the end of the day, truth will stand on its own merits. The truth certainly does not need the Stasi coming out and arresting people for their words. Put it that way. The truth, if one religion which took over the entire world is to be believed, truth obviously became flesh and walked among us. And the truth was up on the cross, whilst everybody was scorning and spitting and all the rest of it. Did not need any one of them. Did not need any one of them necessarily for it to be true nonetheless. So you can try and silence people all you want. You can try and make however many examples of people that you want. I'm trying to think of anything worse, any fate worse than what Christ was put through 2,000 years ago. Can you really think of anything worse? Yet the truth is the truth. And it will stand tall no matter what. And it will stand on its own merits and its own strength, no matter what. Now, speaking of truth as well, one thing that is very, very disconcerting. Disconcerting is the plans of the EU now to open up yet more immigration. To open up yet more immigration by signing an agreement on mobility with India. So at a time where you have already massive demographic replacement that has occurred all across Europe and the cultural changes that have occurred as a result of it, usually with churches being burned down and mosques being erected in their place, so even churches being sold and mosques being put up in their place, right? Von der Leyen in all her treasonous wisdom now, clearly also not being able to read the room on the way these European countries are going, many of them looking at the comparative paradises of Poland and Hungary, and the reason why they are trying to massively persecute Poland and Hungary with economic fines and all the rest of it, because they won't accept the Delhification and Arabisation and Islamification of their countries. Right? Sentiment massively shifting in favour of remigration, nationalism. At this time, she announces signing on an agreement of mobility with India to facilitate the movements of students, researchers, seasonal and high-skilled workers, apparently, with Europe also launching the first legal gateway office in India. This is just fantastic. This is what she had to say on the matter.
We are signing an agreement on mobility. We will facilitate the movement of students, researchers, seasonal and highly skilled workers. And this is also why we are launching the first EU legal gateway office in India. It will be a one-stop hub to support Indian talent moving to Europe. We are signing an agreement on...
Anyone ever thought that maybe we're doing a bad thing by depriving these nations of their supposedly best people, their supposedly highest skilled people, right? That in theory should be dealing with their problems back home? Let me see if I can find something a moment. Let me see if I can find something whilst I'm here. Maybe we should, not be poaching supposedly the best people from the other places of the world, where maybe they should be dealing with their own problems at home, which, make no mistake, are not small problems. Who are we? Who are we to take away the best people from these nations, right? The best doctors, the best engineers, the best this, the best that. Who are we to take those away from those nations when they should be, concerned about developing their own nation? India, if I'm not mistaken now, which I think is very, 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 very interesting, has its own space agency. So you want people on hand to deal with that. Don't you want your best and brightest to be able to manufacture and develop that? Maybe they can also deal with this, which somebody shared on X, for example. Headline which says India causes highest plastic pollution in the world. Many areas of these world have literal rivers of rubbish flowing through them. Maybe they can get the best on hand to help deal with those, instead of bringing those people here and now all of a sudden we literally have rivers of rubbish starting to flow through Wales. Not sure if you guys saw that report in the Daily Mail recently. Maybe by not bringing people here from all across the other areas of the world, many areas like Africa, for example, where this video is from. But not only that, ladies and gentlemen, what's special about India? India, as you know, will have no end of really culturally enriching festivals, right? Really culturally enriching festivals. And even COVID didn't stop these festivals, now, right? Because this video is from April 2021, right? So right in the middle, potentially, or what was at the time, COVID-ridden India in Kurnool. This is what the locals were celebrating, and just makes you think. When Ursula von der Leyen is about the best and brightest, and only the best, whom really we have no right to poach, first off, especially when we have so many of our own best and brightest at home. Just, you know where this is going. So for those of you who are, there we go, there's the volume. So for those of you listening, not watching, this is The glorious Indian poop throwing festival, which I believe they do every year. Tyler Oliveira went out there recently and documented this. Maybe you can look and think, maybe, just maybe, it's not being done in our best interest. Maybe it's not to improve our services and improve Europe and improve Britain and so on. Maybe there's actually different intentions at play. Maybe it's more to do with this little intention of further overthrowing democracy, which in another one of her videos, which I don't have on hand at the moment because I accidentally removed it from my tabs, which I wanted to go through for this episode. Ursula von der Leyen, I believe, unless I still got the video here. No, I don't. Said because we are the two largest democracies in the world, referring to the European Union and referring to India. And I don't know, when such pivotal decisions can be made by a single, selected bunch of bureaucrats in one area of the world in Brussels that affect, grand totals of hundreds of millions of people, thousands of miles away in all directions, often superseding the power that those governments have over themselves. Don't know if you can necessarily call that a democracy. Sounds more like a weird kind of communal autocracy to me. But regardless of that, obviously we know that Big Brother's definition of democracy is much different than most people would think of the definition of democracy. And they've seen increasing manifestations of Big Brother's kind of democracy. And that's kind of why people aren't so happy. It's kind of why more and more countries in the European Union want to leave. Right, all the while, Keir Starmer, with being backdoored by his rent boys, is now trying to backdoor us back into the EU. Which, by the way, if you remember, we covered on previous episodes the draconian surveillance laws that the EU want to bring in, whereby they'll force companies to give them backdoor access to all of your private communications. I believe they're targeting WhatsApp and a bunch of other services as well. Obviously, eventually, I believe they managed to get to Telegram. They managed to get to the founder of Telegram, Pavel Durov, right? If you can't see that if you're a European, native European, in whatever country of Europe you may inhabit, that this is not being done in your best interest, I don't really know what to tell you. I don't think it's that controversial to say that we don't really have anything to gain, as in the people don't, with further and greater fraternization with India. Right? Britain already has rival groups of Indians and Pakistanis often going to conflict on its streets already, given the conflicts that they have back home in that region, which then seem to go away by the wayside when there's an opportunity to cover up a Pakistani asylum seeker status because he's raped an 18-year-old woman. All of a sudden then those cultural and ethnic grievances are forgotten because there's greater enemies at play, namely Britain and the British people. And yet the EU, which many people like Plaid will want to take us back into, as we get on to in a moment, Plaid are going to be relevant to this next section, want to throw open the doors to more of that. The Delhification, the Delhification of Europe continues, right? Next Red Hot Chili Pepper song, it's not going to be the Californication, it's going to be the Delhifornication, alongside the Arabisation and the Islamization. None of which the Europeans asked for. So get ready, Europe. Your Delhification is in order. And a lot of you really want to be taking stock of either where your precious next vote or where your political sentiment wants to go. Because people in America, you already see President Trump at one point using terms like remigration, right? Describe what needs to happen in America. And America is nowhere near as far down the rabbit hole as Europe and the UK are. That means we need to be taking this exponentially more seriously. And when it's all said and done, traitors like von der Leyen need to either be languishing in a prison for the rest of their life or worse. It's as simple as that. Now, Plaid was relevant because, speaking of draconian, legislation and draconian sentiments, return guest, leftist fanatic Sinead Williams has claimed weaponization of misinformation poses a significant threat to our Senedd. So anything the government doesn't like poses a threat to government. Ooh. I wonder. So you're saying is information that you don't like and information that you want central control of, information that you want central control of in the Ministry of Truth, right? The lies that you want to purport, right? Anything that doesn't align with that is going to be a threat to your government, eh? Just think of it coming out of Westminster with the grooming gangs, right? Just think of it coming out of Westminster with the grooming gangs. Weaponization of misinformation, weaponization of racist and Islamophobic conspiracy theories around rape gangs, around grooming gangs would be a threat to our government. So you see what the way is being paved for, right? It's to, in this instance, seem to ban or criminalize, like we saw in Sydney, any opinion that the government in this instance, Plaid, doesn't like. And Plaid told the biggest lie to the Welsh people of all, and that is that they are nationalists. Well, actually, I can't even say that. So maybe I'll end up getting pulled up on Plaid's quote-unquote weaponization of misinformation laws in the future. They've actually corrected themselves now. They called themselves internationalists, and people, for some reason, simply fitting the low IQ sheep-shagging stereotype in Wales, where they can't tell the fucking difference, or at least don't understand why they really should be telling the difference and not be worried about certain labels and whatever else when they start, talking about noticing the differences between those terms and what it actually means, right? What it actually means. David Iwan was quite interesting. He wrote the song Yma o Hyd, right? Which is a common Welsh nationalist anthem, right? And he went on X recently. I had to quote post it for the ridiculous take that it was about a quote-unquote far-right march or far-right demonstration that was happening in Wrexham. I believe it's called Unite Wrexham is what it was called, 31st of January. And he said, can you guys stop using my song? I don't want it linked with your campaign of hate. Called them, I believe, far-right racists or far-right fascists. I can't remember off the top of my head. And Joe Marsh commented underneath it. Can't remember exactly what he said, but I said, you want to spend less time worried about them and using your song. You want to worry more about coming up with, Hindi, Arab, Somali, or Arabic rather, Somali, Eastern European maybe, and all of these other, versions of it with the associated meanings. Because if lefty lunatics, he was president of Plaid Cymru at one point as well, by the way, tells you what you need to know. Classy thing where they're going about, English, England, all the while you're increasingly being run over with Indians and whoever else, right? So you better start working on those other translations, because the Welsh one and the meaning of it is going to be long forgotten, and it won't be the English that are at fault. Correction, it might be the New English, right? Like those old Europeans, the New Europeans, right? It might be those New English we keep hearing so much of the fruits about. But here's Sinead Williams seemingly to tell you about why I am such a threat in this instance to the Senedd.
The threat posed by demagogues of the far right and the billionaires who support them from the shadows with no accountability, and who have weaponized misinformation and disinformation to a terrifying degree in recent years, is now a significant threat to our Senedd. And they will not hesitate for a second before poisoning our political discourse in their efforts to undermine our democracy. So we should not hesitate in countering their lies and deceit with firm guardrails.
Firm guardrails meaning legislation. It looks fair. Firm guardrails are going to mean legislation and criminalisation, right? Much like we see in Australia and other areas at the moment, some of the most draconian legislation coming out of Australia, as we've discussed. Mentions there again the billionaires that support, the so-called billionaires that support the quote-unquote far right. That's a new one on me. I certainly don't see many people bankrolled by billionaires, right, when they're on bridge drops and bridge demonstrations and on these protests. Right? Maybe there's few, but I don't know if you'd even call those kind of like far right, right? They tend to be more of like a open borders liberals masquerading as, you know, nationalists or conservative heroes, right? And are we going to forget about the billionaires that bankroll a lot of these initiatives? Are we going to forget Larry Fink? Are we going to forget George Soros? Right? Are we going to forget things like the Open Society Foundation? Again, it's always what they accuse you of. It's always what they accuse you of. Sean Ed Williams, and this is going about the billionaires that bankroll the far right, right? Namely Elon Musk for restoring free speech to X. Right, that's all it's done. And even as a backlash from that at one point, because it seemed as though he was capitulating to that Brazilian leader who was imprisoning his political rival falsely, Maurice, I think his name was, the guy who had the friggin' cloak that made him look like Emperor, you know, Sidious from Star Wars, and looked absolutely friggin' ridiculous. And he was saying because they're going to comply with the rules of the nation, right? Similarly then, because then Brazil would have this draconian speech legislation coming in as well, that X would heavily censor itself in Brazil, not even to the extent really, even though they're complying with the law, that this judge wanted. Right? This judge wanted to go far beyond the remit of the laws that are at play, as all tyrants do. Obviously, they rewrite the law book as they go along, right? Which is why you see so many governments doing it at the moment. It's why it's so hard to keep up with on times, because you see all these things coming in now. You've seen Shabana Mahmood saying that she wants to basically bring in a panopticon to Britain as a whole, right? No surprise, a foreigner wanted to keep an eye on all of the frigging society in Britain, all of the natives, especially the pesky natives that might not like her, and people like her growing in power in Britain, because our interests are fundamentally in opposition, right? We're panopticons, they belong in prisons, right? And they often are in prisons. What does that tell you about what the UK is turning into? She says her goal, her dream is to have the eye of the state on Britain at all times, to literally turn us into communist China. And now 15-minute cities are becoming a thing, right? Again, this is just, you know, conspiracy theory. This is just thought crime conspiracy theory. So Shauna Williams going to be bringing the legislation against me and other thought criminals in the near future. Because make no mistake, people like this, they will happily sell out their native people on behalf of the billionaires that bankroll them, right? Because otherwise, unless they're getting in funding and initiatives from elsewhere, not from their own people, right? It makes no sense to do what they're doing. It makes absolutely no sense to do what they're doing, ladies and gentlemen, because all of the goodwill, all of the sentiment that maybe would have saved these people if they were to be removed from their seats of power is gone. People want blood. Make no mistake about it. People want blood from the people that have stabbed them in the back and bled them dry for generations. Bled their previous generations dry. That's what I'm looking to do. And want to bleed them and their future generations dry in pursuit of their enslavement, in pursuit of their slavery and demographic replacement. Right? Some of the worst crimes against humanity recently have been committed in Britain, knowingly, by the state. And very few people have seen the inside of a courtroom or the inside of a jail cell, or what they should be seeing, just the floor disappearing beneath them, you know, long drop and a short stop, should we say. People want blood. And so unless politicians like Sean Ed, like all of the leftist politicians, like the leader of Plaid Cymru, like the leaders of Labour, like all the Labour MPs in Parliament, right, and the Greens and so on, they're not getting backing from these massive NGOs on behalf of these massive globalist councils and organizations, right, and foundations. It makes no sense to do what they've done, because they have firmly made their bed with their native peoples. And unless they were getting that incentive, it would make no sense for them to do that. So it's not the far right, quote unquote, or the people that they call the far right that are being weaponized by billionaires. It's genuine, patriotic, working class people all the time with their own businesses. They're increasingly being stamped down on by the boot of democratic socialism. Right? So, with Wales having a pivotal election coming up, you can either expect this to get no worse, should we say, if people applied and whatever are kept out, but I see that as, you know, skeptical. I'm very, very skeptical of that. And you expect it to get a hell of a lot worse if they get in. And I dare say that these problems are going to get a hell of a lot worse before it gets better. It's a terrifying thought. It's a terrifying thought. But this is the war that we're in. This is the war that we're in. It's not a war of guns and bombs necessarily. It's a war of words. And because they know that the one side, in this instance, has the truth on their side and locked down, the others have to use all manner of obfuscation and lying tactic in order to stop that from being known and to keep people scared so they don't act on it. To keep people scared so they are not active in politics. We can't afford to do that, because if we do that, we've already lost. And there's more to it at stake, ladies and gentlemen. There's more to it at stake than you realise. Because Plaid are absolute fucking nutters. Remember I said about trans ideology and stuff like that earlier? Well, maybe you'll have your kid taken off you by social services, right, if you refuse to affirm their gender, right, as Plaid Senedd member Adam Price has been raising puberty blockers for children in the Senedd. It's a subject that he seems to like, quoting from Doge Wales. Plaid voted to give children puberty blockers even when Labour were against putting vulnerable children at risk. I'll just play this video because I found something from a BBC article about Mr. Price's comments from a little while ago. Fair to say, very, very concerning stuff indeed. And this is where it's going to matter more than anything to do with me or you. This is where the future generation and their safety from being sterilised and mutilated by these disgusting monsters is at stake.
Puberty suppressing medicines for new patients under 18 with gender dysphoria. Secondary Senedd legislation in relation to the prescription of puberty suppressing medication. The ban introduced by the state of Tennessee on prescribing puberty blocking medicine to trans youth, gender affirming care for trans youth, the implications of only offering puberty blocking treatment to patients that are on a clinical trial. For many young people, the only way to receive puberty suppressing treatment now will be to participate in the trial.
So obviously that clip is heavily edited, and rightfully so. You might be thinking, oh, well, what was the context around this? What was any of the context around this? How do I know that, you know, he's not, you know, things are not being misconstrued out of context as they can be, right? Give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Well, I went and found something from a BBC article in this instance. If you typed in, what was his name? Bear with. Adam Price. If you type in Adam Price, Plaid Cymru, puberty blockers into Google, you'll have this come up, where this is the section of the article which I think is particularly pertinent because I circled it in red. I think it's important to keep in mind we have examples and precedents of how this is laid out in places like California and California, Canada, places like that, where under Newsom there was an incident of a child being taken away from two parents because they refused to affirm their gender, and I believe they were then forcibly sterilized and mutilated, if I'm not mistaken. There was a case of a split household in Canada. It was covered in Matt Walsh's What is a Woman documentary. Father was told they were going to start pumping her full of cross-sex hormones, i.e. the daughter, within the hour on the mother's behest, the ex-wife. He said he objected to it. They still went ahead with it anyway after the legal battle failed, and I believe he was either put in prison and fined, but he was certainly fined to the tunes of several tens of thousands of Canadian dollars. So if you don't think that this will be massively weaponized against parents who don't toe the politically correct line and turn their kids against the parents like they do in 1984 with the spies, this is what the section of the article in question had to say about Adam Price's sentiments with regards to the gender ideology and child transition especially, right? Which even if for people who are kind of like not pro-trans but are not really bothered about what adults do necessarily, when you come to children, that's when people, you know, massively will turn against it. In a Senate debate, Price said no impact assessment was written, something the government's own guidelines say officials should follow to ensure, ministers should use to ensure ministers follow the law. This is critiquing the Cass review now, by the way, which essentially blew this out of the water until I think eventually Hillary Cass went back and, alienated a lot of the things which she had worked, or alienated a lot of work that she had done. I think she came out as essentially pro-trans, if I'm not mistaken, which is quite interesting. I haven't seen too much about that, but I saw a post from James S's saying about whoever said, they had reservations or whatever about Dr. Hillary Cass. I'm sorry. Obviously, James S being one of the premier forces in this fight as well, against gender ideology. He told BBC Wales, I think it's clear the government have acted unlawfully, referring to the Cass review. Skip down to the point where I circled here. Asked if he was opposed to the ban, Price said it was not for him to give view on a clinical question. Not for him to give view on a clinical question. So not for anybody, unless they're a doctor, unless they're obviously a hyper-politicized doctor, pediatrician, whatever it is, that has already uptaken all of the necessary politically correct orthodoxy. It's not for anybody else to comment on the sterilization and mutilation of children. That's Price's view. That's Price's view. And that's why I said here, Plaid not only disgustingly anti-Wales, they're an active danger to everyone's children. If you don't think they won't start removing kids via social services, if you, the parent, don't conform and affirm them, given it will be an affront to their sexual and reproductive rights. Yes, really, Wales is a country where children have sexual and reproductive rights, but parents do not have parental rights. Castrate and mutilate them, you're hopelessly naive. That's the YouTube link as well to my conversation with Kimberly Isherwood. You should go and talk about that. I touched on this subject with my upcoming conversation with Catherine Watkins as well. Make sure you use the links down below and the codes down below to get early access to that. Look at California, look at Canada. It isn't coming, it's already here. And you can find the article linked there as well. So this post will be linked down below and you can go find the article from that. So yeah, in fact, I have got the one link here as well. And in fact, they actually highlight the case of a young person, Gwayon Williams said, puberty blockers would have helped him avoid, quote unquote, the trauma that has come with living in a body that never felt like mine. So the BBC have obviously tried then to peddle this in order to generate sympathy for this narrative. It's absolutely disgusting. It's a shame that this person did not get the help that they needed. But certainly Price would not give him the help that he needed because he's ideologically captured. This is the thing where, again, sitting on the fence, if you were about to be confronted with a doctor that was about to jab puberty blockers into this kid's arm and you did nothing and you chose to sit on the fence, that is itself a decision, ladies and gentlemen. So Price saying here it was not for him to give a clinical view on a clinical question is not in this instance. It's not in this instance when, again, in my opinion, it's quite clear-cut. Quite clear-cut, especially when you take into account the data clearly shows that most children who have these troubles will naturally grow out of it. And if they're actually kept inside the institutions, rates of them rates far exceeding what we would expect in recovery, even if you leave them out of the institutions, much, much higher in terms of reporting they want to be the opposite gender, i.e. if you put them in these institutions, they'll probably stay bad and they'll stay worse. They'll be a lot worse off than if you get them out of the institutions anyway. It's what an interesting study showed in some of the clips I talked about before. Very, very important study, which came out a good few years ago. Again, I know it's going to be news to a lot of people. It came out a good few years ago. Indecision in this instance is still a decision. Adam Price, it seems, in this instance, would say that he would choose to sit on the fence. Don't forget who owns the fence. Because there's one side that, and this is due to being evil, would massively want the destruction of the innocence of a child and their sexual reproductive capability and their health that's going to stem from the injection of these chemicals into their body. Right? There's one side that would want to preserve the child's innocence, that want to prevent them from undergoing that harm, and hopefully get them to the point where they actually appreciate the body that they've been given. Price saying he would not go and join that side. He would not go and join that side that wants to help a child feel good, feel comfortable in the body that they've been given. I.e., he's not on the good side. And none of the Plaid Cymru lot, none of the Labour lot are. At least it seems, in my opinion. I haven't seen any one of them. It's going to be pretty much all from the right, as far as I can tell. The opposition to things like puberty blockers and stuff like that. A lot of things are coming from many people on the right. It's just solely on immigration. But it's usually people who are more conservative voices that are truly conservative, not conservative in the sense of the party now. Truly conservative voices, right? Usually with a Christian foundation that want to protect these children, whom people like Plaid want to prey on. And that's why if you're not massively inundated and aware of what's going on in the school system in relation to what your child is learning, you really, really should. You can't afford to be a laid-back parent anymore. The days of being a latchkey kid are gone. The days of being able to trust your school system, right? It's gone. As the parent, you can't afford to trust these places anymore. You need to be on the ball. Institutions, every single institution is being weaponized against you. And above all, your mind is being weaponized against you. Your care for your child is being weaponized against you. Don't fall for the propaganda. If you hear a doctor or anybody say now, would you rather have a living daughter or a dead son? You need to get as far away from that doctor as possible. That's quite clear. And finally, speaking of getting away from people as fast as possible, last thing I want to talk about today, which the people of Wales really, really need to take into account. Really, really need to put a lot more care on this than they are. I'm going to play this video in a moment. Understanding the danger that we are in Europe, we are in Britain especially in Wales. As many people now are aware of the threat that Islam and its adherents poses. Right? They have no problem in telling us how massive their numbers are. If you think, we've been slowly genociding ourselves through things like abortion, and through things like contraception and all of those things, right? Growth of feminism, all of these other ideologies. They said the greatest weapon that they have is the woman's womb. They don't care if they have to wait 100 years, 200 years, whatever it is. They'll breed us out. And they've been very, very successful. For all of their often IQ not even amounting to average Western levels, look at areas like Somalia, they've been very, very successful in this regard. Say what you want about them, they do not have confusion about what a man and a woman is. Right? Maybe a lot more of the kids that do maybe need to send to 2-3 years to Dagestan and forget. Right? Mohammed Hijab in this instance, and I think we have good reason to believe him in this instance. Right? Say what you want about all of his other political takes. Right? Obviously, he's no friend of Britain. He's no friend of Britain, obviously. But I think we have good reason to believe him on this. He's speaking earnestly. And if you can interpret this as anything other than a call for war and a call for conquest, I would like to hear those interpretations down below. The call for subjugation of people that look like me and reside in areas, countries like mine. There are 50 million Muslims in Europe. There are more Muslims in Europe than there are in some Muslim-majority countries. If all the Muslims in Europe were one country, it would be one of the biggest Muslim countries in the world. And that's the truth. If all the Muslims in Europe were one country, it would be top 10 or 15. It would be in the top 10 or 15 biggest Muslim countries in the world. It would be a big country. We're big people. So that means we need to start acting like the Muslim community have become the consequence. But if we mess around with this community, what's going to happen? We have to start acting as if we have the upper hand, because we do. As the Quran says, the word of Allah is high. The word of Allah is high. And that is why the Salaf, the early generations, were so successful in spreading Islam across the world. Not to mention, literally by the sword. It's because they had an immense amount of courage backed by this immense amount of tawakkul, which means reliance on Allah. You realize that, look, I'm doing this for the sake of Allah, and it is what it is. Whatever happens, happens. This, as well as his concepts on martyrdom, those who's willing to commit suicide has the initiative, says, can be attributed nothing less than a call for war and subjugation, or at least subjugation anyway, and takeover. And given that there are more Muslims in the UK than there are Welsh people, you should really start taking this a lot more seriously.
Our numbers are massive. There's 50 million Muslims in Europe. There's more Muslims in Europe than there are in some Muslim majority countries. If all the Muslims in Europe were one country, it would be one of the biggest Muslim countries in the world. That's the truth. If all the Muslims in Europe were one country, it would be in the top 10 or top 15 biggest Muslim countries in the world. It would be a big country. We're big people. So that means we need to start acting like the Muslim community have to become the consequence. Make them think, okay, well, if we mess around with this community, what's going to happen? We have to start acting as if we have the upper hand, because we do. وَكَلِمَةُ اللَّهِ الْعُلْيَا, as the Quran says. The word of Allah, it's high. The reason why the Salaf, the early generations, were so successful in spreading Islam across the world was because they had this immense amount of courage backed by this immense amount of tawakkul, which means reliance on Allah. You realize that, look, I'm doing this for the sake of Allah, and it is what it is. Whatever happens, happens. Concept of martyrdom, then I would consider that to be an advantage, frankly. The one who's willing to commit suicide has the initiative.
Look at this. This is the bit. Now put it on mute. This is the bit you want to watch, ladies and gentlemen. Not even necessarily that he's speaking. Remember what I said about the president of the European Conference of Rabbis before? It's not Mohammed Hijab necessarily you need to worry about. It's these people. Not any one of these people in particular. I don't fucking know. You might be looking at this. You might see somebody that you know. Right? So I'm not pointing out any one of these people in particular. It's going to be the adherents of the speaker. It's going to be the people that listen to the speaker that go out and do the work. That's the case with anything, right? You have a mentorship call. You have a business mentorship call. What's going to make that business mentorship call successful is all of the people that are on that call who've likely paid to be on that call are going to go out, implement that advice and be successful. In this instance, that means that a bunch of Muslims all across Europe are going to hear that call and begin uniting with the goal of overthrowing Europe. In Wales, there are more Muslims than Welsh people. So if all, I believe it's around 4 million or so, if all of those 4 million or so Muslims hear that call and unite, there's a very good possibility, given that there's already a decently entrenched set of Muslim communities in Wales, particularly in the cities. Cardiff, for example, one of the mosques that was linked to radicalization on behalf of terrorist groups. Paul Golding talks about it in his book, for example. There was a preacher there that was making waves for being one of the most radical hate preachers that was sending, I believe, had links to terror groups that was sending them off to go and train. If you think we don't have problems with us, we absolutely do. And whether it's the Jews, whether it's the Muslims, or whether it's ourselves and our own suicidal empathy and ignorance, if this call in particular was to be heeded, right, we have a lot to lose, namely everything. If they all decided to march on Wales tomorrow, we could be in serious trouble. So even if you do live in a constituency where it could be still 93, 97, 90, 95% white Welsh, whatever it is, right? White British, should we say. Understand the threat that has been posed to you by governments outside of you as well, given that we are landlocked to many of the countries. We are landlocked to England, right? With no border, not even a toll station anymore. We are landlocked to Scotland as well, so any of these communities want to come down from Scotland to wage this massive war. We know that they have no problems in their own communities of rallying behind their own, right? And rallying for their own interests. That's an existential threat to you no matter where you reside in Wales. It's gotten to that point now. Ah, doggo. Hey, Bailey. And it's certainly a threat to people like Bailey. And I ask you a question, because a little thing of hers behind me. If you won't listen to me, maybe you'll listen to her. Would you choose her? Or would you choose 4 million Mohammed hijabs? For me, the answer is really easy. And say what you want, I should be able to take her on walks anywhere in my home country without having signs put up that I'm not allowed to take her because it could offend certain communities. As far as I'm concerned, it's those communities that need to go, not her, regardless of who they are. This is Wales, and for all of the lefty sympathies of David Iwan, yes, here we are, and we are still here, and here we will remain. Ironically, by being diametrically opposed to everything you stand for, despite being the writer of that song. Unfortunate, really. Very, very massively unfortunate that if you could take the zeal that you have for opposing quote-unquote English colonialism and apply that to the real colonialism and initiatives that are really going to result in Wales being a colony, but not a colony of England. Not a colony of England, no, something far worse. Something far, far worse. So, get cracking on those Arabic translations, my friend. Your new Welsh are likely going to be expecting them. And that'll do it for today. Thank you very much for watching and listening, ladies and gentlemen. Greatly appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it. Long installment to make up for my absence. But yeah, have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Make sure you share this video. Make sure you use those codes down below and the links, etc. to get early access to my conversation with Catherine Williams. So there's 1 month completely free with early access to all other interviews that I do, early access to exclusive content coming up in the future as well. And thank you very much, as always. You'll also be massively, massively supporting me. If you want to support me as well and you're more acquainted with the crypto stuff, then maybe you can go and leave me a tip over on Rumble. But obviously, no worries if not. No shit coins, no meme coins, no scams to be had. Just, I got a spare bit of Bitcoin or Ethereum lying over. I'll send it his way. Maybe not even all of it. Maybe not even all of what you have to spare. Maybe just a little bit to help me keep the lights on and keep the wolves away from the door. Anyway, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You take care. And I will catch up with you very, very soon. Godspeed. Oh, I decided not to do my transition. Godspeed.